Hey, John, this is Jose. It looked like the room is filling up.
Yes, but it doesn't, it looks like, huh?
So, John, when you feel you're ready, maybe you can say a word of welcome to the group.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming, as you heard from Tim. Today, our effort is to talk through and get feedback on all of the discussion items that were identified and preliminarily introduced last week. Joe's going to lead us through a discussion of the various bridge types, and I'll be taking notes and kind of commenting on the CSS aspects as we go. As you know, the bridge types really are a combination of two. They are basically full bridges. A number of them are full bridges with a variety of signature elements added to create a sense of place and create some identity coming into and out of Lafayette. And secondly, then a couple of the bridges are actually signature bridges, a different bridge structure than the viaduct itself. So we've got really, and all of these really have different, very significantly different range of cost from kind of add-on features to a viaduct that's going to be there anyway, all the way up to creation of a very strong signature bridge. And we have two options identified at this point for that. And those, of course, are freestanding bridges themselves that become plugged into the viaduct at any one of those central locations that you just saw on the map. We've also done evaluation of all of these relative to cost, as well as the other evaluation criteria. So that's what we're doing in relative to signature bridge. Then we're going to have a little discussion on the gateway features as well, and what you thought of the discussion there in terms of where gateway features might be appropriate. Would they be freestanding, or would they be possibly part of bridge structures? We talked about a variety of alternatives: arches, columns, structures, and so forth. And if you just had to think of a gateway feature that would be most representative of Lafayette, what would that be? And what should it say? Should it evoke history? Should it evoke culture? Should it evoke any other environmental aspects of the community, and so on? So those are the things we'd like to work through in the next roughly approximately 40 minutes. So Joe, I'm going to turn it back to you, and you want to walk us through the bridge discussion.
Okay. So I'm going to open up the, see if I'm sharing the right file. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see me scrolling?
Yes.
Okay. So now I know which screen I'm actually sharing. So I'm back to the beginning where we're showing the different signature feature bridges. And Gary Magi just now had gone through them at a very high level. I wanted to talk to the graphic and maybe repeat a little bit of what John was saying. So these are the three signature feature type that um, is not truly structural in nature. In other words, if we take away the pylons and the cable, the viaduct themselves will essentially still be in place and be serving to carry traffic on I-49. And these are the two options, which we call single arch or the double arch, that actually carry the structure themselves as well. And as a result of the structural capability of these two options, some of the interior column in option number 4 is actually eliminated. And for option number 5, the double arch, there will be no column underneath the two arches, the dual arch, for the full width of this of the viaduct. So in terms of real space, option number 5 actually perhaps create the most space among all the options. The next one is the single arch option, and the option 1 through number 3 tend to have more column underneath because the viaduct, in essence, is still supported by the column, which you can see depending on the type of girder type that we would pick for the viaduct. So among all of them, in terms of the pylon, they are also the least maintenance intensive. They are basically just, in this case, reinforced concrete pylons that carry nothing but their own weight, and they are so stout that the wind wouldn't even do anything to them. As a result, this essentially has the least of any kind of maintenance after they get built and put in place. And we have seen this type of signature feature in many projects. They do look very grand, and as you see them, you would recognize that that you are at a particular location. It can be special enough that it would define would tell the traveler they are in Lafayette. Provide a lot of lighting opportunities. I think there is some concern about the lighting, but certainly the lighting nowadays can be really designed in such a way that they are so focused that the surrounding environment is not interrupted, not disturbed. It would highlight what the bridge architect wants you to see without sending a glare into the motorist eyes. So different view and different light intensity. And for the bridge architects, the design of the traffic light and the lighting on the static feature can also be moderated. So we spoke about the inspiration of the cable bridge. And this is a layout that we have looked at that seemed to be like an extension of the pylon idea. The only difference really is that we have some additional cable element. The cable element themselves are essentially of high strength wire holding up different type of material. Most of these probably would be a high strength plastic or high strength PE type of very durable material. We can pick different colors for this type of pipe to give special feature that you like. Of course, even the color, the lighting could be of different color. And so much so these days that you can actually change different color, depends on the particular festival that you wanted to let the lighting create that atmosphere for. Just like the pylon, the lighting can be designed to highlight the features without affecting the environment, the surrounding environment. And the third of these options would be the suspension type system. And last time we talked about different type of decorative feature on the pylons, and we talked about Art Deco, but certainly there are many different types of motif, I guess. And you can see I'm not a bridge architect, so my vocabulary for the architectural treatment is a little bit limited. But you can see that the suspension bridge system certainly provide a fairly dramatic look, kind of a network is being presented in this case. It could also be somewhat different. These suspenders could also be a zigzagging pattern, or it could be just vertical, going straight up and down. But this is quite interesting because the crisscrossing, as Bradley Touchstone had indicated, provide the opportunity of having lighting provided at the intersection. So it would give a very distinct feature. Again, it's a matter of people driving through and be able to say that, oh, looking at the lighting, we know that this is Lafayette. So it's really a matter of putting that signature on the section of the viaduct. So then there is a single arch bridge. Aside from the fact that it draws some inspiration from the regional culture, in this case the accordion, I think that the kind of a spinning and twisting network of cables, called it, our architect called it the kinetic cable sculpture, provides some very interesting perspective. Almost at different location, you look at the cable network, you see something completely different. Whether you're on the street level, on the viaduct level, well, or if you're a bird flying. I guess this is something quite possible nowadays. to get a bird's eye view. And as I indicated earlier, this particular structure allows basically a column-free area all the way down here. And on this side, you can see that between the base of the arch is completely open, and between the two kind of outrigger support, it is completely open. Further back, there is a center column, but it is still quite a wide expanse without column. And I think that people who drive through an arch with a cable network like this would not soon forget that this is Lafayette. So the really cool thing about this is that it is indeed a dual arch system. The arch straddle over the local roadway, but then it also, of course, straddle over the two bound of traffic. And I'll talk about this and then just pause a little bit and let our participant kind of ask some question if there are any. And this one is an inspiration from the Pelican. And it is sort of a pelican spreading the wings. And everything down here is basically column free. From the side, it still looks like a pelican. And by the way, the options that we are showing so far, they are all constructed of concrete. Some of them are reinforced concrete. Some of them have a little bit pre-stressing in them. But in general, that particular use of material tend to be low on maintenance. Once you constructed it, there shouldn't be a lot of, there won't be a whole lot of repainting. That's common for steel structure. So on the roadway level, you can see those arches. And there are different things that we can do with the lighting. This particular option shows enough of a lighting to show the outline of the structure, but not intrusive to the users. So I'll just stop here for a little bit, John, and see maybe there are some question about the different structure type.
Yeah, should we start maybe a little bit with the first three, which were the signature elements as opposed to signature bridges themselves? Is there anything we can clarify for everybody about that? Those were the pylon, the cable, and the suspension bridges. Any thoughts or questions or comments on any of those? I guess not. And how about the two signature bridges themselves, the single arch and the double arch? Were those pretty clear in terms of the differences? Any questions there on design characteristics and how those evolved in terms of concepts? And I guess my question to everyone is, does it seem to make sense to be using things like the Cajun accordion or the pelican wings as inspiration for these kinds of things? Is that something that you know, is a good design basis? Will it stand the test of time from your perspective? And do you think it's something viable that would make a strong statement in Central Lafayette for both the community at the ground level as well as the regional travelers who would be passing through on I-49? Any thoughts?
As a reminder, if you want to contribute, you'll need to unmute yourself. So that could be, that we're not hearing feedback from people who are still muted. While I've got your attention, Mary, are you with the airport, or are you just joining us from the public? We have two Marys, so we're a little bit confused. Anybody there?
Yeah, anybody having technical problems?
Warren, I'm trying to talk. I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Hey, Warren.
Okay, now we can hear you.
I wanted to make just a couple of comments on the bridges as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I like the timeless design of I drew a mind blank. Number 3,
The suspension.
the suspension bridge. I mean, you see those everywhere. Those will never be out of style. Those will never be old. I think that would definitely withstand the test of time and be an asset. Out of 4 and 5, I like the single arch. I don't know if that modern design will kind of fade away and be as timeless as the suspension. That's just some general thoughts.
Good. Thank you.
This is Stephen. I'll share my brief thoughts. The idea of spending money on faux bridges is about the most absurd thing that I can actually think of in this project. So if, as a local municipality, we're going to be asked to spend money, I cannot, in good faith, endorse faux anything. So that leaves us with the latter two in my mind. And I like the single arch. I think it is, an attractive bridge that would capture the designer's, gusto. But with that, I honestly don't believe that as a local municipality who is going to be having to foot the bill for this, or in the other category, these are really any options for us. So that's all I have to say about that.
Those are very good input, and I think it also reflects some of what we heard from the last time when folks are turning in their some of the initial questions or reactions. Certainly, the single arch is one of the probably the most prominent of the options, and it does also provide that space.
Okay, any other comments before we move into our analysis that we've done so far?
Each of those, and we'll talk a little bit about those, certainly has his own, has differences in terms of constructability and how, whether or not it would affect the, become a factor in maintenance of traffic. So maybe we will just go ahead and go into a little bit of the evaluation, John.
Let's do that.
Okay. So we set up the evaluation matrix based, of course, first and foremost, cost is something that we all know. Is something that we have to be mindful of. But I think a lot of folks had asked about construction of the viaduct in general, which relate in relationship to maintenance of traffic, how much of the everyday life it would affect during the construction of one type versus another. And then from the, maybe somewhat also have an influence on the users and the local resident as well, is the amount of and how frequent the bridge need to be inspected and maintained. Whenever you have to do maintenance, there will be some bridge crew going out there looking at things and so on. And then, of course, the aesthetic, which is what the signature element is to provide. And we wanted to have a way of evaluating how much the public likes them. So as far as the cost is concerned, the pylons alone is actually the lowest cost. And then it go, the next one higher is the cable bridge. The suspension bridge is in the kind of in the middle. But then if you look in comparison to the single arch, there is a difference, but it's not substantially different. So I would almost say that the suspension and the single arch is almost neck to neck. The double arch tend to be the highest because it's got multiple arch element that has to be constructed. So the total elimination of column underneath the two arches kind of come at a cost. And you can see that the premium cost, which is the amount that you pay over and above what just a straightforward viaduct construction, is that it would bear a premium, an additional 34 million, and then for the double arch, and then it go down on this list back to just the pylon. In terms of the maintenance of traffic, so the evaluation criteria essentially is looking at how much road closure is needed, and at any given time, how many of these false work, which are the temporary supports that again would occupy space and would affect to some extent the traffic pattern, so that traffic is carried safely around them without accidentally hitting the false work. And then the footprint on this particular, in this graphic, we're showing a bridge that is constructed in cantilevers. What it really means is that we start construction at the pylon, which is kind of in the middle of the bridge, and then the superstructure construction would kind of cantilever or hang over all the roadway and local streets and so on. So the interruption would be a little bit more temporary. The footprint would be a little bit smaller. And then there are other types that had to do with equipment. How much, in the case of erecting the arches, for example, you have a combination of having a crane out there, erect a lot of the false work, and then have to be lifting a big piece. So the crane has to be bigger, and it occupied the space also has to be quite a bit more in terms of the construction itself and the logistic of it. Chances are you would have to close the road and get the equipment in. They erect one portion of the bridge, they open the road, and then the equipment had to come back in a week or so later. So all of those affect the maintenance of traffic. And in terms of this particular case, it's almost the least interruption of local traffic is almost exactly the same order as the cost that we just looked at. The all green, which is the least intrusive, is for the pylon bridge, and then it goes up in terms of the intrusiveness on the cable stay, and then the two kind of middle of the road would be the suspension and the arch, and the double arch is in fact the one that would require much more interruption to the local use of structure as well as the occupying the space in order to build them. Then in terms of inspection or maintenance, I mentioned before that the material of choice in all the options are concrete, which by themselves, after you constructed them, they tend to require relatively minor maintenance, occasional visual inspection, some patches maybe over time. But generally concrete is a low maintenance item. So each of those structures that involve some cable element will require some inspection. The cable bridge option, because the cable themselves are not structural, so for the most part, the connection does not see the same kind of wear and tear as, and does not require a sophisticated a set of hardware design at the anchorages, which are the connection point of the cables. So the inspection maintenance for the cables bridge option is relatively low, even though it is cable. And the same also goes for the suspension bridge item. The stay cable for the single arch tend to be a little bit more because these are real structural cable. So the inside of these structural cable tend to have many parts that is there to keep them durable. But at the same time, in order to make sure that they are durable, there are design features that they get open and would be inspected by a boroscope or some other instrumentation that we can look inside to make sure the cable is performing well over time. So this kind of inspection, it is kind of done routinely in the bridge industry, so there's nothing unusual about it. But then it is something that will require some additional activity over and above the cable bridge option and the suspension bridge option. So the same with the vertical hanger that's coming off from a dual arch. So although there are fewer of them, but they do require some inspection that is done by specialty groups. So just wanted to mention that. And as a result, you can see that the ranking of them, this time you'll see the single arch and the double arch is completely matching because the technology of the cable is similar. And as a result, the inspection activity and the need for having specialty inspectors to do the maintenance is about the same for both of them. Although the single arch tend to have more of those cables, but we do not often need to inspect every single one of them. We pick the characteristic one to gauge and be able to know how the cable system itself is performing. And then you can see that the two cable element for the non-structural cable system got a little bit of a ding to make them yellow, but then it is still relatively low. So as a result, again, for inspection and maintenance, it is very much follow the same pattern as the cost. And a static is, in a way, kind of reverse. Even though the dimension seem to suggest that the single arch is the greatest in terms of providing space underneath, but as I indicated before, the sum total space is actually the greatest in the double arch. So you can say that as far as the space that is made available is just the reverse of the cost and the inspection and the MOT. The greatest amount is actually the double arch, and then it kind of go backwards into the pylon. I see that we only have another, 10 minutes or so.
Right.
I wonder what's the best use of this 10 minutes, maybe to open up for some more discussion.
Yeah, why don't we have a quick discussion on the evaluation here, and then I'll do a quick overview of the gateway stuff. Any thoughts, everyone? I think you probably could see that the pylon and the cable were the cheapest of those, 6 to 8 million, and the suspension's about double of that in terms of the first 3 bridge types, the signature features. They also scored pretty well, all 3 of those, in terms of the maintenance of traffic, as well as the inspection and maintenance. But then, of course, because those are all viaducts dressed up with signature features, they don't have the kind of clearance, as Joe just pointed out, that the single arch or the double arch do. They only have about 185, 190 foot of clearance. On the other hand, you get into the signature bridges themselves, they're in the $20 to $35 million range. So easily 4 times, at least 4 times the amount of some of the earlier bridges. A little more difficult to build in terms of all the factors of maintenance of traffic and all those kinds of things, the footprint and the logistics. A little more expensive to inspect and maintain because they're more sophisticated and they are structurally, they're real bridges, and the structure, all the signature features are also have a structural function to them that has to be regularly maintained and clearly regularly inspected and reviewed. On the other hand, though, those 2 are also those that create the very large spaces underneath in terms of free space with no columns, anywhere from 475 to 550 feet. One point we didn't make, everything that you've seen, we've assumed the 22-foot clear space from the ground to the bottom of the structure, which was a requirement in the record of decision from the last EIS back in 2006-07 timeframe. So everything we've looked at here has all been based on that. Obviously, if we were to raise this structure up in this area, that would increase the viaduct price itself, and it will increase the bridge costs for either the signature or the double arch, but it would be pretty consistent. I mean, the viaduct increase in costs, say if you did go to 30 feet, would be the same increase for the pylon, the cable, and the suspension. And probably for the single and double arch, the premium for the increased height would be the same. But everything we've shown was based on the illustration of 22 feet, which is a good roughly 6-7 feet higher than your standard clearance on a normal interstate bridge. So with that in mind, are there any questions, thoughts, comments folks would like to make on the evaluation? Does it make sense what we what we've come up with, and it's based on Warren and Stephen's earlier comments. It sounds like the single arch is more favored, and at least from an aesthetic and a timeless design perspective, if you were going to go to this to the signature bridge itself, and possibly the suspension. If we were going to go with just the signature features, the suspension is very timeless, and we have lots of examples all over the country and around the world. But are there other thoughts and questions on, can we provide any more information on the evaluation and how we did it, or does anybody want to challenge any of the things we said here? Okay, if not, shall we move ahead with the gateway features? And I'll go through this rather quickly. All along throughout the process, there's been discussion that in addition to doing something signature in the central area, possibly a signature bridge or signature features like we've just talked about, there might be a desire to do, particularly at the entry points to the community up near I-10 and down near the airport, there might be interest in doing something to kind of announce the entry into the Lafayette area, Central Acadiana, that kind of thing. And so we've got a quick overview here of some gateway types as we've surveyed gateway features around the country, around the world, tend to be a combination of either arches. Let's go back a little bit. I think you jumped up ahead. Arches where you actually pass under columns, possibly between, or sculptural artwork, three-dimensional sculptural artwork that can stand aside in the open space and actually be integrated into the landscape. The four locations that have been kicked around, coming from earlier community meetings, obviously the Northern Gateway, the Southern Gateway, which I just talked about, possibly something in the downtown, could be associated with a signature bridge, could be some type of statement even without a signature bridge. And the Willow Street area was one of the other locations thrown out. This all occurred back in a all-day design workshop in January of 2016, and then it was discussed as part of the refinement of the earlier plan that took place from 2016 to 2018. Examples, as you can see from around the world, a number of national ones as well as international ones that you saw on the previous slide. There's some arches, columns. A lot of the use of pylons as well as artwork, oftentimes integrated together, and so forth. Anyone want to express any thoughts on that before we leave this subject and go back to the larger group? Appropriate or not? And one other thing I should add, with the airport going through all the redevelopment and upgrading that's going on there's been a little bit of discussion going on as to whether we could work with the airport to do some kind of an entry statement that would both serve the enhanced regional airport as well as be the southern gateway to the project. Does that make sense? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Okay. Hearing none. And you obviously